The South is the birthplace of the very best in American music. Rock, country, R&B, gospel, hip-hop, jazz, bluegrass, and the blues. The soundtrack of the South echoes from the mountains to the sea and crosses all genres of the American musical experience. The Southern Chord podcast is on a mission to collect engaging conversations with those musicians, vocalists, songwriters, and producers who have crafted the most compelling lyrics and melodies from the American South. Every artist, every song has a story, and the Southern Chord is committed to capturing these uniquely human tales of the creative process. Those stories of people who love music enough to make it and share it with audiences all across the South and beyond. This is the Southern Chord, conversations from the soundtrack of the South. And here's your guide for this musical journey, Tony Bauman.
Welcome in to this edition of the Southern Chord podcast, conversations from the soundtrack of the South. I'm Tony Bauman. Thank you for taking time to listen in and eavesdrop on my conversation with friends and friends-to-be in the world of music. And I appreciate your checking in on this. This is a special edition for me because I am still, once again, close to home here in Aiken, South Carolina. Now, let me paint the picture for you. Aiken, South Carolina is a town here on the western edge of South Carolina, right across the river from the very famous Augusta, Georgia, the home of the Masters. And it's a town that is principally known, or has been known for many, many years, as a place where, well, the best thoroughbred racing horses in the country are trained. And once upon a time, we're talking Kentucky Derby winners, Preakness winners, Belmont winners were trained right here in this railroad town on the western side of the state. But what a lot of people don't know, they know Augusta, they maybe have heard about our horsing industry here. What a lot of folks don't know is that Aiken, South Carolina has itself a very fine music scene. Not just local music scene, but this is a place that over its history has attracted world-famous musicians to live in this town, and world-class musicians have settled in this town. And I got to say, my guest today, a dear friend of mine, is a world-class musician, in my opinion. He is, as a matter of fact, this talking portion of the Southern Chord podcast is actually bookended by a composition by my friend and my guest today. And you start out really hearing his work, and you end up the podcast hearing his work. And so I decided it was appropriate enough on this edition of the Southern Chord to spotlight my friend, a true world-class musician. And we're actually behind the scenes at a really cool music store, so I kind of dig this. My friend, Bill Bentley. Bill, welcome to the Southern Chord podcast, my friend.
Tony, it's great to be here. We've known one another for a good while now. We've actually done some songs together. We
actually have. In the interest of full disclosure, Bill and I have written a song or two together, and that's a privilege to have done that with you, and I appreciate it. And so the song that starts us off, that begins the Southern Chord podcast every time, is a song entitled "Transit of Venus." Now, I love the song because it's got this magnificent kind of ethereal feeling to it. It really just, it feels and sounds otherworldly to me. And then, of course, I know the story about the transit of Venus, but I want to introduce our listeners to that story. But I also want to introduce them to your creative process as a musician, whom I respect immensely. So, tell me a little bit about Transit of Venus. When folks hear that song beginning to play at the beginning of each one of our podcasts, what are they hearing, Bill?
Well, the music is just guitar, bass, and drums. Mm-hmm. But it's written in a way to give you that feel that you're talking about. And the Transit of Venus that I referred to was 1882 in Aiken, South Carolina.
Yeah.
And I heard the story as a kid, but never paid much attention to it. And then when they moved parts of that transit over to the museum, and I was telling my friends about it, they were going, that happened in Aiken, South Carolina? I've lived here my whole life and have never heard that story. So then, reading some Wikipedia of it, it had a piece in there that says John Philip Sousa wrote the Transit of Venus March, I believe is what it was.
Yeah, Transit of Venus March.
So I went and listened to it. I didn't copy any of it, but I thought, what would it sound like if I did one on that? So that's the story of making an instrumental version. And as we were talking earlier, the middle part of it where it gets kind of fortissimo, dun 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 dun. That's when it's supposed to be lining up.
And that's what I want to delve deeper into this creative process. Now, okay, you're inspired by the story that most of us who grew up here in Aiken, or many of us, have heard about this being the place where the scientists from all over the world came and gathered in Aiken, South Carolina, to set up their telescopes and to see this astronomical phenomenon that was so very rare. So,
right.
You know, and people a lot smarter than me in terms of mathematics, they figured out this was the spot to do it. So, and they landed here, and as it turns out, one of the German scientists that came here to observe the transit of Venus, he ended up going back to Germany and becoming a national hero over there.
Exactly.
And
and a lifetime pension.
That's not a bad gig to have, but
especially if he was only 20.
That's true. That's true. But so how do you go about taking this historical event and transforming it into a piece of music? Where did you start? If you recall, where do you start just saying, I'm going to create something to pay tribute to a scientific event?
Right, without using words.
Without using words, because that's the whole point of what you're doing now with this project.
And, you know, when you heard us back in May, remember I said a little something that caught your ear. We usually don't talk when we play. We go straight 45 minutes if it's a 45-minute gig, all instrumental music. So I said a little something that night that piqued your interest about the song. And then when we got through, you know, me and you talked a little bit.
Right.
Well, it's like that. How can you take a creative process and use just music with no lyrics and convey that? Well, you know, you have to talk about it a little bit. You have to tell a little bit of the story.
Yeah.
Then it makes more sense. And then as you go yourself or anybody else and they read the story about our hometown having this event go on, and nobody talks about it.
No.
You know, when the kid told me in elementary school it was in his backyard, I didn't know what he was talking about. Never pursued it till about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And realized they had moved it out of his backyard. They were going to trash what was left. They were going to trash it. And there's a stone that they made for this particular piece that's left, and it's over at the museum now.
Yeah.
You can go over there. It's outside. You can go over there and look at this thing.
Right.
But you have to know the story. And it's like any writer that's using words that they want to convey something, they start hunting and pecking. How am I going to say this? So it's even a little more difficult. How am I going to say this instrumentally?
Right.
Now, we're a three-piece band, but I hear an orchestra in my head. I just do not have an orchestra to convey it.
Right.
That's one particular song out of 29 that we have that I want orchestrated.
The band is, by the way, called Under the Sonar. It is called Under the Sonar. And
because we couldn't use Under the Radar. It was already taken.
But there again, I mean, if somebody just picks up this recording and listens to it, they may not have the backstory of the Transit of Venus. So what did you do musically to try to capture the best understanding of that without having to use those words? I mean, how did you, what was it in what you did with the guitar and with the drums and that, where you really just tried to paint that picture, if you will, in that work?
I'm a melody guy. Mm-hmm. And some of your best remembered music will be from the melody. So, it had to be something that pulled you in about the melody. Okay. With that particular song, I'm only thinking about two things. Okay. Number one, it's not lined up yet. So it's coming to that place of being lined up. So that starting of that is the waiting. They're waiting. They've got their equipment ready. They're dealing with cloudiness and all of that. So it's going along, and then it lines up. And that's the piece in the song that's real active. Right. Da 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 da. And when I get the orchestra to finally do this piece, it'll be fortissimo with the big kettle drums and all going on. Yeah, and it's on my bucket list.
I was going to say this is really this is a song, and I want to play it actually in just a couple of minutes. This is a song that you do in your head. You're hearing this fully orchestrated, fully arranged, and it's going to have this big.
And guess what? There's no guitar, bass, and drums like we performed it in it. It's all orchestrated instruments. Yeah. No drums, kettle drums. Yeah. No piano, only the orchestrated instruments. Violins, French horn, I hear oboe, I think. But till we get this thing panning out, Now, to be able, if somebody watches this and they want to contact me and they have an orchestra that I can use.
It's time to, we have to get my first week guest, Paul Hughes, to say, hey, why don't you bring those strings that were on your record and we're going to put this thing together.
Yeah, it's going to come together because I'm going to keep pursuing it because it's the one and only Under the Sonar song that I want to orchestrate.
Well, I tell you what, let's take a pause here in the conversation. I want to play. You hear snippets at the beginning of the show. You hear snippets at the end of the show. I want to play for our listeners the full, at least the current pared down version.
That's right.
Of this record. It's called Transit of Venus, and this is Under the Sonar featuring my brother Bill Bentley. Listen to this thing on the Southern Chord podcast. Under the Sonar, featuring the guitar of Bill Bentley and Transit of Venus. That is the full version, not the orchestrated version, but the full song that is the theme for this podcast. And I want to just say, for the record, I appreciate you letting me use it, because you gave me the option to really kind of go through the full Under the Sonar catalog.
That's right.
And choose the one I wanted to be. And that song just... it did, I think what you intended to do is it drew me in from the get-go. And for me, the reason that I chose Transit of Venus to be the theme for this is, and this is going to kind of sound like what's happening in your head, to be perfectly honest. When I listened to
That's
that...
dangerous.
Hey, trust me, I don't let anybody into this one either, okay? But to me, as I was listening to it, and because this is a show about the creative process and about, how Southern musicians and songwriters make music, when I listened to that, I said, that's kind of gotta be a little bit of what it sounds like inside the head of a Southern musician.
Yep.
That's what the synapses to me sound like inside the head of a musician.
Exactly.
And that's why I chose it. And now that you tell me deeper about how inspired, how the song, how your inspiration for creating the song, I'm like, yeah, we were on the same wavelength, and I didn't even know it. We had mutual synapses going on at the same time.
There you go. I'm telling you, man. It's different writing with words, which I've done, with you.
Of course.
And we wrote Crossing Over together.
Yeah, we wrote,
it's between the two of us.
That was fun. We basically collaborated via email.
And that came out of our heads.
Yeah.
And that's the way it works with me. You get, with any writer, I don't care if it's a book, a movie, something starts in your head, and you have to follow it. Unfortunately, at this age, I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning following things, and if I don't do it, you lose it.
Well, and it's interesting that I'm not going to ask you your age, but it's very interesting that you say that, because I recently watched a documentary on Paul Simon, who is 90 years old now, I think, or
he's
something.
80-something.
Yeah, but
Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel.
Yes,
yeah,
Paul
he's 80-something years old.
Paul Simon
lost his hearing over here.
Yeah, he lost his hearing, but he has just released this album about basically spiritual music. It was
happening in the morning.
The Psalms.
I better get up.
The 7 Psalms, and that's basically what he basically said is he will wake up in the middle of the night and write, and I think that's. Well, let me just go ahead and give you another compliment, brother. I believe that's the work of a genius that will wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go, I got a notion, I got a melody, I got a something, I got to seize it, because otherwise I'm going to forget it.
I just this past week found out why. We can sit here, me and you right now, and we can start writing with our conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening at 3 o'clock in the morning when you wake up and you're hearing this stuff is your subconscious mind. When you can get in solitude and work on stuff, it is a little bit different than just sitting in the Brill building knocking out, song after song by what you know. You're hearing stuff that you don't know, and you have to figure out how to make this happen.
And I think in that particular case, because I have gotten up at 3 o'clock in the morning because I've had a dream, and I had to get that down because it was such a compelling dream. I had to write it down.
Exactly.
What you're getting, I think, is a piece that is truest to who you are at that point, because it's completely it's not wrapped in conscious thought.
It's the heart.
It's the heart. It's the core of the creative person. And I that's what I love about this particular part of this conversation is you're showing me what I'm seeing in so many different, what I've heard and seen in so many different artists is that you got to seize the moment, and you've got to let yourself, you got to get outside of the conscious decision to write a song, and you just got to let it happen.
You have to be an antenna. Put the antenna up and see what comes.
And you've got to, I like to say, you've got to be the transcriber for something divine.
Exactly. I agree.
I mean,
I've been hearing this stuff since I was in the 8th grade. Okay?
Yeah.
So at some point in my life, I think I was 45 when I said, for the rest of my life, I'm going to pursue all types of original music.
Well, and you've succeeded with this Under the Sonar project, because I will tell you, I have sat and I've listened to something I want to talk about here, a project called From Aiken to Macon.
Yes,
but
sir.
I've listened to that, and I'll say this, it to me, sitting there and just listening to that recording, which is just 6 or 7 songs, right? It takes me personally back to a time when I was discovering the music of the Moody Blues, who I love.
Oh, yeah.
And I would put on Days of Future Past on vinyl. I'd sit there barefoot with my headphones on in the dark and just get lost in it. And this, even though this is an instrumental piece,
same thing.
Yeah, this is an instrumental piece. It is a transportive instrument, what you're doing with this Under the Sonar. Where did you decide that you were going to go? Because you've described it, and in the marketing of what Under the Sonar is, you've described it as progressive rock, but I think it's deeper than
Southern
that.
prog rock is what we came up with as, what is this stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're from the South.
Right.
You had Southern rock that was termed with the Allman Brothers Band.
Right.
So we have a tie to that stuff, being this, Aiken to Macon type of Southern thing.
Right.
And I've always been pretty much a rock player. I can play different styles, but I always tend to have that rock side, being born in that era.
Right.
Being brought up in it.
Right.
And so that's kind of what comes out. That's what I've pursued a lot in life, that type of style. This band has that Southern rock thing, but it's progressive. So we couldn't call it Southern rock because the progressiveness of it.
Well, and I think Southern rock is a label, is a marketing label, basically, that has been applied to that genre.
That's right.
That does have, it's the Allman Brothers, it's the Marshall Tucker Band.
That's right.
It's
right.
It's that type of stuff, and it tends to sort of equate the Southern free spirit. But it's more orchestral rock.
It is.
And and I think that even though you don't have the full realization of an orchestra attached to, the Transit of Venus and whatever else you might be hearing that has eventually in its full fleshed out form would have an orchestral arrangement.
Right.
There's something like the Moody Blues, like Pink Floyd,
right.
That has that extra level of, this isn't just a guitar and drums.
Right.
This is, I'm trying to create art, period.
It is. It's basically art. And that's what we came to grips with. And some people that listen to it, they have no clue, they don't understand it because there's no words. So that's why we usually don't play any longer than 45 minutes. And we usually don't talk. We talk when we start, we talk when we end, and we go from one song to the other. None of them are over 3 minutes and something. And then we change the genre of it. So it's not all the same. So you're going to have to listen to a lot of stuff because we mix it up, Yeah. We haven't played any really country-oriented guitar licks and stuff in this, but we could.
Now, I'll tell you, the only time I've heard this group play live was at basically a smokehouse, outside of the SRP park.
Right.
And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to you. I'm chatting with a friend. I got people chatting me up, old friends I haven't seen, and I'm concentrating on grits that's got pimento cheese in it.
Yeah.
But I left there having listened to the album and having visited that night and caught chunks of what you were doing.
Something that was
chunks
a little different.
of what you're doing.
Yeah.
I left there specifically thinking, this is the type of band that I've got to get into a room with some black light and there's nothing. There's no distractions. There's sitting on big beanie chairs or just kind of barefoot and just with black light and just like, go, Bill, go.
There's that, and there's riding in a car on a trip. It works real well.
But see, the thing is, I can't get the three of you in my back seat.
That's right.
So I might have to be set.
We might be 3 feet tall, but.
Oh, we're going full Jim Morrison.
And guess what? They're green. What happened here?
You're going full Jim Morrison on me here, but I ain't going that. All right. Now, you're wearing the shirt that says Capricorn Sound Studios in Macon, Georgia.
Can you see it?
Yeah, they can kind of see it. That's
their logo.
And you and I share something in that you and I have both created in that place. Now, I have not created music in that place, but once upon a time when I was an afternoon DJ I reached out to the folks at Mercer who had just acquired that spot right down there, and they let me do my afternoon show sitting by myself in that space that had not been fully renovated, but I'm sitting there with a fold-out table and my little laptop computer, and I'm looking across the room at the ISO booth in the corner, and I'm looking over to the left at the console behind the glass.
Did you have lights on?
I had lights on.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, well, and what I was saying, I'm not a ghost person, but I was actually sitting there in that space feeling in a metaphorical sense that I was surrounded by the ghosts of Southern music.
You were.
And because that place is so historic. And the thing is, I had to, and we'll get into this. This might be a little longer than a 30-minute interview, but that's okay.
We do part 2.
But here's the thing.
I'll come back.
Hey, listen, I'm good with that. But we did, I had such a really magnificent experience. I had to do this for myself. I had to go in the ISO booth and just sing to myself. There was nobody there listening, but I had to stand in that ISO booth knowing that greats of Southern rock had stood in that ISO, had been in that room and had stood in that same ISO booth. I had to do it. Yeah. And then at the end of the day, when I packed up, I put everything in the trunk of my car. I went to a little place called Grant's Lounge, which I had known a little something about. And I went there and I bellied up to the bar. And I ordered me a PBR and sat there in Grant's Lounge. That's right. I ordered me a PBR and I sat there in Grant's Lounge. And the idiot here has not written it down, but I'm sitting there talking because I walk in and I see this cat and I'm like, he looks like an Allman Brother. And then and I'm sitting there talking about him. Turns out he was a keyboard player for one of those bands that came out of the era, but I cannot remember the name of the band.
Could be Eddie Stone.
Eddie Stone.
Could be.
Does he got the beard and the long hair and okay?
It could be Eddie.
And is he the bartender there at?
No.
This guy was working as the bartender there, but he had played keys on one of these groups that had passed through the whole Capricorn era because everybody and their grandmother at a time recorded at Capricorn. I mean, I'm
thinking Grinder Switch.
You got Livingston Taylor, you got Delbert McClinton, and I mean, you got the usual suspects. You got the Allman Brothers and the Marshall Tuckers and all that other stuff.
Two you don't know about that came in.
Yeah,
were Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton. They've been there.
My head just hit the microphone.
Eric Clapton's been in Grant's.
Okay, I got the hair standing up on the back of my head, right?
Oh, yeah. I know.
Now, what you've done very differently than I did is you recorded in Capricorn after it was...
Back up.
Yeah.
Back up.
And when Mercer University came in, they spent the money and they made it a functional, as it is now. It's a functional studio. They have recaptured the glory of Capricorn Studios. There's a museum down there and everything. Yeah. So you've gone down there and you've recorded in that space. Take me through that. Okay. How being a fan of rock and roll, growing up in the South, growing up in this era, that had to be for you a spiritual experience.
It was spiritual and a bucket list item. And it costs money to do it.
Yeah.
So, usually on our bucket list items, we got to spend money, So, in 2020, like January 2020, a friend of mine and I went down there to go through it.
Yeah.
and COVID was going on, and we got down there, and it wasn't really booking a whole lot. But I asked what the price would be, and that's just curiosity, asking what the price would be to record there. So we ended up going in November of 2020 to do the first, it's called the Capricorn Sessions.
At the height of COVID.
At the height, we wore masks in there and did that recording. And so, we went back 2 other times past that. We possibility will go back for a 4th one. But
can I go?
Yes, you can.
I'll do the hand claps on whatever. Well, no, wait. You just do instrumental stuff. Sorry, but
no, we'll put something. Believe me, I can work you in my head. I can work Tony B in because I've done it. Remember?
Yes, we've done it. But I'm sitting there going, now I've broadcast from Capricorn, but to think that something that I did, playing the triangle cowbell, I don't know, but it was actually.
What if I write a tune called Tony B's
no
Extravaganza?
Doesn't have to be about me, man. It just it doesn't have to. But the idea that you got to go in there and did you know going in, because you booked, what did you say, an 8-hour session?
Yes, 8 hours.
You booked an 8-hour session
each time. So
you went down
3 times, 8-hour session each time.
So you've had 24 hours in that Capricorn studio. Did you go in fully knowing what you were going to do, or did you go in improvisational?
No, we knew exactly what we were going to do. Mm-hmm. And usually with this band, we can play live.
Right.
The 3 people playing the tune. And we recorded us live. What you're hearing is live from that studio. And it's going through a $200,000 console that they had custom built for that studio.
Wow.
And we never did any more than 3 takes of the song. Some of the songs you're hearing are 1 take. And we captured what we needed to capture. We never went over, I don't think, in an 8-hour session, maybe 2 hours in tracking. Very little overdubs. I can point out, through the 29 songs, on one hand, the overdubs, and very little, because we play this stuff live.
Yeah.
So we wanted to capture it. Number 2, since I can't write music out on paper, I wanted to capture these songs where, we play like 15 of them live. Well, when you got 29 of them, what are you going to do with the others? Well, you'll forget them over time if you don't have them captured. So I wanted them captured in case we want to pull one back out and start putting it in our current list.
So you don't have an actual arrangement on paper. These exist inside of your head.
And those recordings.
And but I'm just saying you're not taking sheet music into that studio.
It's all memorized.
These exist right here in your noggin, and once you've got them down, when you are rolling tape or rolling digital media on this, it is basically coming straight from your head through your fingers onto that media.
And we've learned the arrangement. The 3 guys have learned the arrangement. We've worked on it, and we say, this is it. This is the arrangement. We might capture it in our rehearsal space with a phone and listen back and say, that's it. So let's book the thing. We go over the amount of tunes that's going to be on there for several weeks because we know the clock is going to be ticking.
Right.
We go in there, spend about 2 hours tracking. The rest of the 6 hours is mixing and mastering those songs. So when we walk out, I have a master disc that I can make into CD copies. Now I've started a record store, and I'm just putting all this music from my closet since 1970 onto this space in the record store to keep. Yeah. And there's all kind of stuff.
But so you went into Capricorn and you recorded. You have 29 songs that were recorded in that historic studio.
No.
Okay.
We have 5 CDs that total 29. The first 2 I recorded in my studio.
Right.
Then I decided that's a labor to be playing on it, to record it, to mix it, all that.
Right.
I wanted to go do the bucket list. So the third CD is the Capricorn Sessions.
Right.
The second one is more Capricorn Sessions. And the third one at Capricorn is from Aiken to Macon.
Right.
And that's the deal about drawing our musicians and the Capricorn and all this stuff. And my idea of growing up in Aiken, that I live in a black hole. I was told to leave here as a teenager. I tried it. Didn't work. I came back, and then I was told to move to Nashville. I didn't do it because I thought I could do what I wanted to do right here and send it there.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
But, the thing
it does
is,
more today.
Well, and it does more today because you're not limited by the technology of having to have this console like you had at Muscle Shoals, like you had at Capricorn, and that sort of thing. The interesting thing is, so all told, how many compositions do you have that you recorded in that Capricorn space?
I'd have to pull them out and count them.
Okay. But it's something.
There's at least 15 or more.
Okay, so that's a pretty good number. I mean, you're probably the only human being that I know personally that has recorded in the Capricorn space that many records. I mean, for me, going in and recording one record at Capricorn, going in and recording one record at Muscle Shoals Sound, that would be like, okay, I can check that off my list now and I've done it.
Right.
You can now look at basically a full catalog of work that you have created inside. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. That's sacred space when it comes to Southern musical history. Capricorn, although it was almost lost forever,
right,
truly is a sacred space. When you think of the number of people who have been in that building, who have laid down tracks and that space, I mean and again, not the literal sense in terms of this,
Not to interrupt you, but some of the people that recorded back in the 70s there are still recording there. Chuck Leavell is in there a lot.
Chuck Leavell, man, oh man, wouldn't that be something to just like roll in there and you're at the museum or whatever, and all of a sudden you go, yeah, Chuck Leavell's just across that. He's there on the other side of the wall recording.
I've had this crazy thought of asking him to play on a tune. I've had that crazy thought.
Here's the deal. If you do get, now, not that I wouldn't just love going down there and hanging with you guys, but you do realize that we may not be friends anymore if you got Chuck Leavell to play on, on something and I was not there.
We ride down there together and there's a space in the car.
Okay.
We do.
Oh, man, this is so cool. I'm excited for you being somebody who loves this music so much, is that you've got the chance to do that. Because for a musician who loves the music as much as you do, that it had to be a bucket list item for
It's a blessing, Tony.
No doubt.
I mean, it is a blessing. And, you follow your dreams, right?
Right.
And, when you have a bunch of dreams, you have to put down what's the priority of the one I want to follow.
Right.
To check it off.
And Capricorn was it.
It was it.
Now,
it's satisfied a lot in my heart.
Now, have you? I'm assuming that you haven't. But is Muscle Shoals a spot that you want to record one day, given the history of it?
Well, there's two studios.
The Jackson Highway.
The Jackson Highway.
Kathmandu.
I've been to Jackson Highway and I've been to Fame.
Yeah.
When I got to Fame, I was able to walk around everything.
Right.
Okay. When I got to Jackson Highway, it wasn't complete yet.
No.
I only got in the front room. It is very tiny place.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So,
but you think about the number of people who have.
I think about history.
Uh-huh.
And I'm tied into about history. When my brother-in-law owned the old Arthur Smith studio in Charlotte, I had to go do that, and he would tell me stories about Arthur Smith when James Brown came in and recorded Papa's Got a Brand New Bag there in Charlotte. And James Brown put a Coca-Cola on Arthur's organ. And Arthur called out and said, James, can you take that Coca-Cola off my organ? And James said, Yes, sir.
Well, and the interesting thing, if we ever, I'm assuming so much here,
That's
but
right,
if you ever got to record at Jackson Highway, you'd have to, obviously, because you're a musicologist or a student of music history, that you'd be recording in the same space as that the Rolling Stones recorded Wild Horses.
Exactly.
You'd be recording Kathmandu, Bob Seger. You'd be recording in the same space that Joe Cocker fell asleep drunk in the back room.
Paul Simon
with Loves Me Like a Rock.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's that. That would have to be, for me, that would be a
try
bucket.
not to think about it till after you've done it. You know what I'm saying? Because you could get nervous, and you got to focus.
And see, the thing is, at Jackson Highway, you could still record on that same analog system that's been refurbished, and you're sitting there like, I'm recording on this system that the spirit has gone through the fingers of Bob Seger into this.
Well, not quite.
Okay.
The board, the mixing console,
that
they moved in there, they bought from the basement of Chet Atkins' home studio.
Oh my goodness!
That's the board they have in there now.
Okay,
it has a ring on it where he used to put his Coca-Cola, and his wife sold it to them. That's what's in there now.
That's still pretty sweet, though.
That is pretty sweet.
I mean, you're standing in this space where God knows what Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were doing over there. You got Joe Cocker asleep in the back room, and you've got Paul Simon in here just tinkling on the piano in the corner.
Incredible.
And it's like, okay,
all of those places are incredible. Sound City, you've seen the documentary. The thing with Fame with Rick Hall, and all that stuff. It's just tremendous. I follow all of that. I suck it in, you know, all of that history. I love it.
Well, you have done something that not a lot of people can say they've done, and it's tremendous. And I just appreciate you taking the time to share that with me, my friend.
Yeah.
And we will have you back another time to
Thank you.
to talk, because I want to talk about your roots as an artist.
Sure.
The next time we visit up, because
they're long.
well, and I know, and again, having done a little bit of research, you talked about, you never made that big move up to Nashville, but you have crossed paths with some people who are making their living out there in that beast of a world that is the music world. Oh yeah, one of the guys that you got a picture with not too long ago was a fella who every Saturday night or however many nights a week, it stands up there on the stage at the Grand Ole Opry. And we're talking
running it. Kerry Marks is running
Kerry Marks. And there's a guy, he's going to be on the podcast. He's already said he will. But Kerry Marks is going to talk about, he's an Aikenite here, but now he's the guy who makes sure that Opry band sounds like it does for every one of those musicians that stands up there in that circle.
Yep, exactly.
And that's pretty sweet.
It's pretty sweet.
Aiken's got a good heritage here, and we won't talk about the fact that Andy Williams used to live about 2 miles down the road. So.
Exactly.
So
did Fred Astaire.
And Fred Astaire. And, we're talking about the crooner himself, Bing Crosby, who would stroll these streets before. They couldn't, they wouldn't let him sing at the church, but that's an whole other story. I'm going to have to get us a musical historian in here to talk about the old school roots of music here in Aiken. But Bill Bentley, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. We will have you back on here shortly, my man. That is Bill Bentley, Under the Sonar. Check it out, and make sure you get yourself a copy of the Capricorn Sessions from Macon to Aiken. And
I can give you the website too.
Go ahead.
I hadn't done that, and you can post it. In the bottom.
I will.
It's thebigadventuremusic.com.
Got it. And you can get all these records. But I strongly recommend, if there's any still out there to be found, get that Under the Sonar from Macon to Aiken on CD. It's
a few left.
It sounds real good. No, you got the masters. We're going to talk about putting these on vinyl.
Oh, that'd be cool. I have thought about that.
We're going to talk about putting this in because I
that.
want to. That's the record I want to do the old Moody Blues treatment with. I want to put that baby on vinyl, and I just want to sit there in a darkened room and just.
I still play vinyl.
I do. Hey, it's hot now, man. I mean,
it's expensive.
It's expensive, and I'm sure it's expensive to make too. But all right, man, I appreciate it, Bill Bentley, and thank you so very much for being with me, and thank you for listening to the Southern Chord podcast. The conversations from the soundtrack of the South. And, if you'd like to, I'm not glomming, but if you'd like to support this project, we do have a Friends of the Southern Chord. If you want to go on there and chip in, because it costs money to travel across town. But, and you might pay for my recording session over, but all right. So, anyway, that would be the dream to do this podcast over in Muscle Shoals and in the Capricorn Studio.
Exactly.
We have to make. Wait a second. We may have to make that happen. Our next conversation might have to be a Capricorn.
It'll cost both of us.
That's okay, man. We might can make that happen.
We eat at S&S when we go down there.
All right. I'm going by Grants again. But would you play that?
H&H.
Oh, I ate at H&H when I was down there too. I had to do it. Had to go by the Little Richard's Boyhood Home. I had to, I did it all. I was music geek my first time in Macon.
I'll take you deep down in the woods.
Oh, that's what I want. You got a saxophone player I want to meet. Trombone player.
And trumpet.
You got a
I do.
You got a trumpet player I want to meet because that's a story I want to hear.
There you go.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Southern Chord podcast, part 1 with Bill Bentley. He's coming back, and we'll see you next time right here on the Southern Chord podcast. We're going to Capricorn.